The porch light sputtered against the cool night, casting erratic shadows across a quiet suburban street. Tires crunched gravel as two figures approached a modest brick house, their thrift store HOA Security jackets hanging loose over hunched shoulders. They pounded on the door with deliberate force, badges flashing under the flickering bulb, cheap plastic pretending to hold authority. "Open up," one barked, voice thick with manufactured authority. "You're in serious violation. This could cost you thousands if you don't comply tonight." Inside, the homeowner froze mid-step, his mug of tea trembling in his hand. He was a black man who had built a quiet life here, mowed lawns on Saturdays, waved politely at neighbors, paid every due on time. Yet something about the sharpness in their voices, the smug impatience in those knocks, sent a chill crawling down his spine. "This isn't right," he whispered under his breath, setting the cup down on the counter with a soft clink. The pounding grew louder, the threats more venomous, talk of liens, legal action, and police reports. The walls of his own living room suddenly felt like they were closing in, shrinking under the weight of intimidation. A floorboard creaked behind him. He turned, startled. From the hallway emerged a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette. The dim light caught the silver of a small insignia stitched onto a worn Navy SEAL t-shirt. The son had arrived home early, no fanfare, no warning, still carrying the gravity of missions he couldn't talk about. His eyes flicked toward the door, then to his father's trembling hands. Without a word, he stepped forward, posture steady, a quiet storm of discipline and power. The flickering porch light caught the steel in his gaze as he reached for the doorknob. But when the SEAL spoke, the intruders realized too late they had picked the wrong house. That afternoon, the neighborhood Facebook group had been buzzing, and the whispers over back fences were sharper than usual. A neighbor's voice had drifted through the open window. "HOA's cracking down tonight, especially on certain residents." The pause after certain was thick with unspoken bias, like a blade sliding back into its sheath. To anyone listening, it sounded like procedure. To him, it was a warning. He'd seen the signs long before tonight, their petty games cloaked in official language. Last month, his trash cans were mysteriously overturned, and somehow the HOA blamed him for unsanitary conditions. 2 weeks later, a notice appeared on his door accusing him of an unauthorized structure, nothing more than a bird feeder his late wife had loved. Each incident was designed to chip away at his dignity, to make him feel like an unwelcome guest in the home he'd worked decades to afford. Neighbors who once waved from their porches now averted their eyes. At the mailbox, he overheard muttered complaints about property values and keeping standards high. He knew what that coded language meant. He swallowed the bitterness, choosing grace over confrontation, until tonight's pounding at the door proved grace was no longer enough. In the digital ether, imagined tweets already fled to life. "Can you believe this HOA harassment in 2025? Disgusting." Another read, "They picked the wrong man's house tonight. This isn't going to end well for those fakes." Even the thought of a wider audience watching these injustices fueled a small spark of resolve inside him. But these bullies had no idea who was about to answer their knock. Earlier that evening, in a cluttered garage reeking of stale beer and motor oil, the two imposters congratulated themselves on yet another brilliant plan. They weren't HOA officers, not even close, just bitter neighbors with a grudge. To them, property values were sacred, and the presence of longtime black families in the subdivision was, in their narrow minds, an affront to their imagined order. They'd watched too many reality shows about neighborhood standards and convinced themselves they were vigilantes for community pride. One of them, a stocky man with a faded ball cap, slapped the hood of an old pickup and smirked. "Intimidation always works. People care when you flash a badge and talk tough," he bragged, voice dripping with misplaced confidence. The other, wiry and restless, laughed in agreement. They swapped stories of past missions, leaving bogus violation slips on widows' doors, shaming young renters at block parties, spreading rumors that drove a single mother to sell her home in fear. They'd never been called out, never faced consequences, and the thrill of unchecked power had become addictive. Tonight's target felt, to them, like another easy score, a quiet man they assumed would buckle under pressure. Their arrogance blinded them to the risks, to the simple fact that every intimidation campaign has a breaking point. Tonight, though, they were about to face a man trained to dismantle threats calmly and decisively. The son had been gone for what felt like a lifetime, serving in corners of the world most Americans would never see. His tours overseas were carved into his memory. Moonlit raids where silence meant survival, rescues pulled from roaring seas, and moments when one wrong breath could have cost an entire team their lives. Each mission had stripped him of fear and forged him into someone who could stare chaos in the eye and not flinch. But through every firefight and lonely night on foreign soil, one image had anchored him. A small brick house on a quiet street, his father's laugh echoing in the backyard, the smell of cornbread on Sundays. Protecting that home wasn't just duty. It was the reason he'd endured every impossible mission. He'd seen oppression and cruelty overseas, but he'd also seen communities rise, ordinary people refusing to bow to bullies. He carried those lessons like medals on his heart. He remembered a summer evening years ago, sitting on the porch steps as his father spoke softly, the setting sun painting the sky gold. "Real strength is quiet, son," his father had said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "It's not about noise or anger. It's about knowing when to stand tall without shouting." That sentence had guided every choice since. Now, back on American soil, that quiet strength was about to erupt in a way the fake cops never saw coming. The door swung open with a deliberate, unhurried motion, and the Navy SEAL filled the frame like a shadow cut from stone. The porch light flickered across the insignia on his shirt, but it was the steady weight of his gaze that froze the two impostors mid-sentence. "Evening," he said evenly, voice low and controlled. "Can I help you?" The stocky man recovered first, puffing out his chest. "This is official HOA business. You're violating regulations," he snapped, forcing authority into each syllable. The wiry one chimed in, shaking his cheap badge. "We've got multiple complaints. You're risking fines, maybe even legal action if you don't comply tonight." The SEAL tilted his head slightly, as if considering their words. "Which regulation, exactly?" he asked. No sarcasm, no anger, just precision. The question landed like a trapdoor beneath them. The stocky man blinked, caught off guard. Several. Yard maintenance. Structural code. Structural code." The SEAL's tone didn't rise, but the space between words felt like a vice tightening. "Which subsection? And under whose authority do you enforce it?" The wiry one stammered, his earlier bravado slipping. We don't have to give you details. This is standard procedure." The SEAL stepped forward slightly, not enough to threaten, just enough to shift gravity in his favor. "Procedure usually comes with documentation," he said. "Show me." They exchanged a nervous glance. The father watched from behind, his heart hammering, half terrified, half in awe of his son's controlled poise. The impostors' voices rose, bluster replacing logic, as if volume could cover their cracks. Then, with one quiet sentence, the SEAL flipped the power dynamic completely. The SEAL let the impostor's noise crash against the walls for a heartbeat longer, then cut through it with a calm that felt sharper than any shout. He took one measured step forward, closing the gap between them until the porch light etched his shoulders in golden shadow. "Here's the thing," he said evenly, producing a small, weathered wallet from his back pocket. He flipped it open just enough for the metallic glint of an official military ID to catch their eyes. "I'm a United States Navy SEAL, home on leave." His voice didn't waver, didn't need volume. It carried the weight of battles fought and survived. The wiry impostor's smirk faltered. The stocky one swallowed hard but tried to bluff again. "That doesn't." The SEAL's gaze hardened, and his next words landed like a thunderclap delivered in a whisper. "You're impersonating law enforcement. That's a federal crime." Silence. The night itself seemed to pause. The impostors shifted uncomfortably, their badges suddenly looking like cheap toys under the porch light. The father, standing just behind his son, felt his breath catch, not from fear anymore, but from pride swelling like a tide. The SEAL subtly angled his stance, not aggressive, just unmovable. The quiet dominance in that movement said everything. This was no longer their stage. The wiry man's eyes darted toward the street as though searching for an exit, while his partner stammered, We didn't mean, this is just. If this scene were live-streamed, the internet would already be ablaze. Imagine split screens flashed, tweets scrolling by. This is legendary. That seal stare, though. HOA bullies picked the wrong house tonight. Hearts, fire emojis, and applause reactions would flood timelines worldwide. But the fallout from this moment would spread far beyond the porch. By morning, the quiet street that had once felt suffocatingly small was the epicenter of a digital storm. Neighbors who'd filmed the tense standoff uploaded shaky videos that spread like wildfire. The clips, grainy porch-light footage of a Navy SEAL calmly dismantling two fake HOA cops, shot to the top of trending feeds before breakfast. Hashtags bloomed overnight. #HOA hoax. #SEAL justice. #stand tall. Memes sprouted within hours. One showed the imposters' wide-eyed faces under the caption, "Mission failed before it began." Progressive commentators called it a masterclass in composure. Even local community pages, once silent about harassment, lit up with messages of support for the homeowner. By midday, the local news aired the story, interviews with neighbors painting a fuller picture. This wasn't a one-off scare, it was part of a pattern. Officials announced an investigation into impersonation of law enforcement and potential harassment charges. Viewers across the state shared the footage with comments like, "This is what standing your ground with dignity looks like." For the homeowner and his son, the surge of solidarity felt like sunlight after a long storm. But beyond the retweets and sound bites, something deeper was shifting, a community reckoning with its own shadows. And the lesson the community drew from this night would resonate even louder. The next evening, father and son sat together on the porch where it had all unfolded, the air calm and starlit. They spoke quietly about courage, about how integrity doesn't shout, it simply stands firm. The father's voice trembled with pride as he said, "We showed them tonight that unity beats division every time." Around the neighborhood, whispers turned into meaningful conversations. Neighbors who had once looked away began to confront their own biases, determined to build a fairer community. The moment wasn't about winning a fight. It was about proving that dignity cannot be bullied. Real strength isn't in intimidation, it's in standing for what's right. And their story became a rallying cry for dignity everywhere.